ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tuesday night reading of the Bible. I'm Pastor Lou Kilgore, and I am pastor here at the High Mountain Presbyterian Church. And we are inviting our Zoom members to come and join us as well.
Hello.
Hello, Colette. How are you?
I'm okay.
All right. That's good.
I'm wearing my mother's hat today with the veil. See the veil?
I see, yes.
I think it's got crunched up a little bit.
So, what's the occasion? Is it because it's Halloween?
Yeah. I'm my mother.
I see. I see. You dressed up as your mother. Well, I didn't know your mother, so I can't tell whether you look like her or not.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I got my love of hats from her.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a nice one.
She was on her way to being missionary with my Aunt Margaret, but met my father in New York. He was a sailor and he was cute.
Well, that's been the end of many a missionary's mission.
So her mission became me and my sister.
Well, that's a worthwhile mission.
No, and she was a nurse also.
Oh. Well, tonight, for Colleen's benefit, plus for the benefit of those of you who are tuning in, we are reading and reflecting on Psalm 32, verses 1 to 11. And we'll be discussing that and talking about it. Let's see, I'm going to see who else is coming to join us. Somebody. Oh, several people are joining us already. Good. Hello, everybody. Welcome.
Hello. Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Video, sorry. I
There we
have to
are,
push
there's-
too many buttons. Start this, start that, start the other thing.
All right. I had just said to the live stream audience, we are gathering tonight. I hope everybody's in good health and ready to talk and share a little bit. We are reflecting on Psalm 20. What did I just say?
32.
Yes, it is. It's Psalm 32. I've got it open right in front of me in my notes. I don't know. I just lost the number for a minute. So, how is everybody tonight? I had asked Colleen how she is, and she's, just so you know, for Halloween, she is her mother. So, she has her mother's hat on. So she's
Colette.
Yes, Colette.
Good costume, Colette.
I wasn't going to ask. Because I know you love hats, so I never know how you will show up. But however you show up, we love that you show up. Right?
And how are you tonight, Elaine?
I'm doing well, thank you.
It's nice to have you with us again.
Yes, I heard about it last week, and I couldn't make it, but I did go in later and watch.
Oh, good.
So I know what you're doing.
Okay, good.
So checking up on us, eh?
Yeah, keeping tabs.
We have a few more coming from Claremont tonight. There's Alice.
Yeah, there's Alice. Yep.
Yes, yes, Alice.
I'm here. How's everybody?
Okay. Happy Halloween. No one has a mask on.
Yes. It was a quiet Halloween day until we did trunk or treat down at the school, and whew, that was wild. It's organized chaos, but it's a lot of fun. Kids had a lot of fun. I don't know how those parents are going to get all that candy out of those kids' hands before they go to bed.
If they're smart, they'll hide it so their parents can't find it.
I know. Oh, I thought you were going to say the parents were smart. They would hide it on the kids.
I don't think that's
The
going
kids
to
have to
happen.
find it. Yeah.
They're not going to let it out of their sight.
You're thinking like a
Unless
child
they-
here today. You're
They
thinking.
barter with each other
Yep.
to figure out who likes what, right?
Like this, I have to tell you, I break for trick-or-treaters, so if anybody comes to the door, I'm putting you on mute.
Oh, nice.
Can't miss this.
Oh, that's nice.
We
I
have-
have candy, but no kids.
We never
Yeah.
we never get
Right.
kids. We haven't had kids in years. Like
Really?
they just don't come down our dark street.
Right.
There's no street lights and there's just nope, it's not inviting. So we don't get a single kid. But I did go get a bag of candy today just in case.
Just in case, right.
And then of course I have the dilemma
Oh,
of what to do with it.
Now you gotta eat it.
Nope,
Right.
not gonna. I am not gonna. I am not.
I made
Hopefully Laura is hiding it now while you're away.
That's right. That's right.
Roscoe buy candy that I can't eat, so I'm
Yeah.
good.
There, buy something you hate.
It's got nuts in it, and I can't have nuts, so
Oh,
unless I eat around them.
Well, you
no,
haven't.
no,
Oh,
no,
look
no.
at you.
There you go. That's what I used to do.
You're thinking creative now.
oh gosh.
All right, why don't we start with reading? I know there was a couple more that will jump in with us, and we'll catch them up as we move along. But I think it'd be good again to start with reading the psalm. I want to say ahead of time, I've read this psalm now a couple of times getting ready for tonight, and I think this psalm and our study together invites, if you choose to take advantage of the opportunity, it invites our willingness to talk or just to name with each other what the rhythm of the life of faith is like for honest people, for those who want to be honest and want to share that sometimes we do things we're proud of and sometimes we do things we're not proud of. And this psalm addresses that and encourages us to take charge of that situation and not let it calcify us in our life, not let it lead us into a pathway that leads us away from the vitality and the joy of a life with God. So, having said that, who's going to read? Psalm 32. Barbara, do you have your text in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Okay, would you mind?
Now it is the joy of forgiveness. Happy are those whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. Happy are those to whom the Lord imputes no iniquity, and whose spirit there is no deceit. While I keep silent, my body wasted away through my groaning all day. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My strength was dried up as by the heat of summer. Selah. Then I acknowledged my sin to you, and I did not hide my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. Selah. Therefore, let all who are faithful offer prayer to you. At a time of distress, the rush of mighty waters shall not reach them. You are a hiding place for me. You preserve me from trouble. You surround me with glad cries of delivery. Salah. I will instruct you and teach you the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you. Do not be like a horse or a mule without understanding, whose temper must be curbed with bit and bridle, else it will not stay near you. Many are the torments of the wicked, but steadfast love surrounds those who trust in the Lord. Be glad in the Lord and rejoice, O righteous, and shout for joy, O you upright in heart.
All right, so anybody have any thoughts or reactions that jump out to you from this first reading? You know what happens, and that is if you don't talk, then I fill in the time.
That's what I'm waiting for.
Okay, well, you may,
Words of wisdom.
yeah, you may not get another chance.
No.
So my thought in coming into this is, you know, sometimes a preacher makes a very deep and fundamental assumption that allows the preacher to preach. And that is that you, as a human being, as a person in the journey of faith, that your experience is like mine, and that mine is like yours. Now, it doesn't say that we're exactly alike, but it says that our fundamental experience of life, of being a human on this planet, and of being a person who attempts or desires to have a faith walk, that I can read this psalm and I can know some things about you because I know them about me. And that doesn't mean that everything's true, everything that is true of me is true of you. But enough of it is that way that I can assume, and I do assume, that if I talk a little bit about my experience, that you will recognize it. And that together we can seek encouragement together in the alikeness of our experience. Hello, Judy. Welcome.
Hello, thank you. Hi.
It's all right. We just finished the reading of Psalm 32. And I don't know. I'm trying to figure out whether we can talk about this tonight. Okay? So I don't know. Can we talk? Can we talk?
Why not?
Yeah, because what I want to say is that the psalmist says that in our lives, we do not, any of us, walk according to God's will. Now that sounds pretty lofty, and I don't mean it in a lofty way. I mean it in the way that I sometimes struggle with. You know, the Apostle Paul's words are a comfort to me when he says, the good that I would do, I don't do. And the things that I don't want to do, those are the things I end up doing. And he finds himself in this predicament, and I find myself in this predicament, and I don't go around like with a badge of courage and you know, walk with a big sign on myself that says I'm a sinner. That's not the point. But the point is, I am. I am. I don't walk, I don't do the things that I want to do. I leave things undone, and there's no reason for me to leave them undone. And I'm not, you know, if you tend to be a person that tries to take care of someone like me, I'm not interested in your caretaking. I'm telling you, this is the truth about me. And I have an idea, you may not like it, but I think it's true about you too. And so there's the presumption of the preacher. And so the psalmist, in this case, in Psalm 32, I can tell you, spoiler alert, the psalmist at the end is trying to lead you and me into a pathway of joyful living, of honest to God, joyful living. But according to his thoughts and his or her thoughts and her instruction, that begins with an honest inventory of ourselves and an acknowledgement of these things that I don't know how else to say them. They deviate from what God wants for us. That we wander off the path. I could start to give some illustrations, but the psalmist doesn't. We become jealous of people, and we react out of that jealousness, or we become angry, and we live into that anger instead of examining it. We carry around in our lives thoughts that we know better. But the psalmist, in this beginning part, he says, "Blessed is the one whose transgression is lifted, whose sin is covered. Blessed is the one against whom God counts no iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no deceit." Now, let's be clear. The psalmist is not talking about somebody who doesn't wander off the path. But he's describing someone who is living in this experience of God who does not count the iniquity against us. And I don't know, it's a religious word, iniquity. I don't know what you fill in the blanks for, and I don't know if you feel like talking about it. You probably don't. But, what are these things in your life? Can you think of them? Does it come to mind the things that the psalmist is trying to get you to talk about or to think about? And what the psalmist assumes is, in verse 3, we would prefer to keep silent about these things. We would prefer not only not to talk about them in Bible study with other studiers of the Bible, but we would prefer to not even acknowledge them to ourselves. And to cut to the quick, the Psalm says when you do that, you are going to make yourself sick. You will make yourself sick. And he describes that sickness as groaning all day long, by day and by night. You'll feel a sense of heaviness of God's hand. Your tongue will turn dry and roll up in your mouth. It's not a pretty description of what it's like if we try to live our lives without this, this way of confessing the truth that we know about ourselves. Now, I'm going to stop for a minute and see if I've touched any buttons you want to relate to.
No.
Now, Debbie's pretending there's a trick-or-treater at the door. She just left.
I have a comment because when I did this, my Bible is actually in the car ready for tomorrow's Bible study, and I was too lazy to move it. But what I have now, what I read is the New Revised Standard Version Updated Edition.
Okay.
From 2021.
Wow.
And it mentioned the word Salah. at
Yes.
the end of many of the verses, which I'd never heard. So I Googled, of course, and there are several meanings of Salah. One of them is forever, and one is actually a person. It could be from the Hebrew Bible. So this is something I never heard of. I've heard that word before, but as part of a prayer, but I wasn't sure exactly what it meant.
I looked it up also, and what I found was that they weren't sure of the meaning of the word in Hebrew, and they thought it might have meant an interlude where you stop and think about what the psalmist is saying, and maybe even interject a choral part or something like that. But it's funny because in Arabic, the word salat means prayer.
Right.
So,
I thought that I remembered that it was also an Arabic word.
yeah. But I'm not sure what it means in the Psalms, and I guess the scholars aren't, completely certain either. But it is a good thing to stop and think. I think the psalmist is also saying that. Stop and examine. And that's probably the theme, to examine your life, to examine what the psalmist is just talking about.
Yeah, I would agree. We listen to professors talk about these strange words that appear in the Psalms, Selah. Like I had one professor who was convinced it was a timing, it was a meter, a timing thing that was given because these psalms were sung often in the gathering of faith, and this would be a place where you would stop. You would say this, and then people were given a chance to stop and to not just to think, but to absorb what's being said and to take it in. And it's in some ways it's part of what, like if I was to title this this study of Psalms, I would make the title Selah, because we could go through and we could read this psalm, and we could say, well, now isn't that interesting? Isn't this something that that's very nice to learn? But this psalm has intention. They say you can read the Bible, or you can let the Bible read you.
Right.
And
I found another definition. Salah is used in lyric Rastafarian vocabulary. It can be heard at the end of a spoken word segments of some reggae songs.
Really?
Its usage here, again, is to accentuate the magnitude and importance of what has been said, and often is a sort of substitute for amen.
Oh, that's cool.
yeah,
Yeah, I like that one.
My mother's name is Zillah.
Oh, my God.
all right. Well, you trumped us all. Right there.
Oh, no.
That's
But
it.
and she always said it was a name that, well, her whole family was, of course, very Methodist. She said it was a name from the Bible, but it is spelled Z as in zebra, Ella, Zella.
Wow.
It may be that they took the word phonetically and translated it into something that was English.
Wow.
Okay, so we're focusing on the word Selah and what it means, but I want to make sure we're not running away from what.
Is that avoidance therapy?
I'm wondering. I feel a little avoidance going on here. It just seems like we're trying to walk away. Selah says, stop, think, pay attention to what this little phrase ahead of us just said, that God does not carry around a list of things of charges against us, though we live imperfectly, God does not carry a charge around us, but there's a process here, which is we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to own up to this, this reality. And so I want to know, is it just me? Because I know what they're talking about.
You just want this to be a confessional, that's what you want.
Yes, yes.
That's
gonna-
what I was going to do.
I'm going to go.
Does this then cover areas like acts of kindness or generosity or forgiveness, or is it all of that? Is it that we've been too busy to take action in any one of these areas of our lives? Is that what?
Well, I think that what you're saying gets at some of the things that I would put on my conversation with God, and that is, I mean, you know, I talk a good game. I can talk a lot about, you know, what it means to be a person of faith and define what a good follower is, but there's a lot of times where I don't do it. So I think that that's one of the kinds of things. You know, that's part of it, but I don't know in your particular life, how does it take shape? I mean, how
So
does
is it really then situational?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, if I've been encouraged in the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years of my life, as Bible teachers have helped me to answer the question, what does God want from me? What is the law of God? You know, what is the law of God? You know, and I'm grateful for places like in Micah, you know, to love God, you know, to love kindness, walk humbly with God, and to seek justice in the world. Okay, so I have a sense of that, but, you know, I'm not, whew. I don't necessarily want you to take out a measuring stick and measure my life in terms of how much of my life is committed to those kinds of things. You know, I do it. I manage to actually do nice things once in a while, or kind things, or I manage to once in a while take a courageous stand on behalf of something that I believe in. But more often than not, that's not the flow of my life. I get to the end of the day and I'm taking an inventory. If I'm ready to be honest with myself, I don't know. Again, if I say these things, I don't want you taking care of me. I'm just trying to tell you, I'm trying to get the ball rolling here so you'll all jump in the boiling pot with me, you know?
Well, I guess one of the questions is, if we know those acts and we know that we're not performing them at the time that they could be performed, I guess the question is then, what prevents us? Is it time? Is it lack of interest? Is it energy? You know, what is it that prevents us? Particularly when we're aware that we're not doing it at the time that we should be doing it. It's one thing to think about it later, but it's another thing to know at the moment that it's not being done. And then I guess the question is, you know, at the moment, why is it being done?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. You know, when I'm in a mood of really picking on myself, I'll say, well, why doesn't it get done? And that's because, you know, I'm just a bad person. I'm a fake. I talk a lot about faith and I don't follow through. So I can get into that negative kind of head. But see, what the psalmist is not worried about that. The psalmist says, have you taken the time, Selah, have you really taken the time to open yourself to see those places where it's referred to as, what is it, the will of God, the divine will, by transgressing the divine will. Are you willing to see those places, and are you willing to name them? Or do you just rush on by them and go, oh, well, I've got good reasons for all those things?
So the answer maybe is, you just said it, is time, a willingness to take time for reflection.
Yeah, and I think honesty. Just honesty. I mean, listen, in the last 2 weeks, with the news cycle and all the things that go on, we talk about what characterizes our time right now, right? We talk about, well, the problem is everybody is making fake stories up and fake news, and there's just falseness all around. And boy, it sure is discouraging to live in a world where you don't know what the truth is. Well, the psalmist might hear you say that and go, well, do you know the truth about you? And are you willing to do a journey to discover your own truth? Especially the truth of how and when and where your life, for whatever reasons. I mean, Judy, I have to tell you, if I could answer to you, why is it that we do not, why do we, and I mean we humans, why do we consistently not walk in the words here are good, in the divine will? Because
is it not only willingness, and then I guess the further, you keep asking questions, and why are we not willing? But isn't it really willingness?
well, where does it say somewhere, the spirit is willing and the flesh is weak? Why is the flesh weak? Why? Why is it? And the psalmist, see, it's interesting, in the psalm is not expecting you to solve that problem. It's not. The psalmist is assuming that you are going to continue in that pattern of sometimes knowing the will of God, or knowing what the will of God for this moment, or the will of God for the group you're involved in, and then not doing it. That's going to continue. But what he goes on to say is, then are you willing to be honest about that? Will you Selah? Will you stop and be honest about that? Because if you do not, it will fester, that truth will fester inside of you, and it will diminish the quality of your life. It will rot you from the inside out. If you are sold on the arrogance of yourself, and you don't have any humility that you care to share with the world, and you're unfolding, again, an arrogance about yourself, and you're unwilling to take on the honesty of humility and look honestly at yourself, the psalmist says you are on a pathway of destroying yourself.
Yeah, I like that word arrogance. I mean, I don't like arrogance, but I think that's the heart of the issue here, that we collectively humans know the arrogance of putting other things before God. We worship money, we worship power, we worship things that take us away from God and God's path. And if we're arrogant, we will not admit it to anyone else or to ourselves.
Right.
It's when you have a modicum or a lot of humility that you're able to admit that.
Are we also talking about characteristics, maybe not characteristics, but things that we do that we're aware that we're doing, and we can admit to those things, but we don't change it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is that what we're talking about?
I think this is a big topic, and I think those things you just described fit right in there too. I mean, I think there are degrees of it, which is there are things that we do. Like I've been thinking a lot, I don't know, I wasn't a great fan of the show Friends, but I've been thinking a lot of this man's life that is on display right now, this Matthew Perry, who died in his hot tub. And his, are you familiar with his story, with that, it's out there?
He's out there.
Yeah.
So this,
Yeah.
multimillionaire young man who was a famous actor, but unbeknownst to anybody that was with him 24 hours a day, they worked together, they were together, they did not know of his addiction. They did not. And for the first 10 years, he did not know of it because he hid it from himself. He was aware of it. I'm sure there are lots of times where, like, in my work with addicts in recovery, every night they say, I'm never going to drink again. I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to take those drugs again because look what happened. But that's not the same kind of inventory that the psalmist is recommending. That they say in the 12-step program to take a fearless inventory of your life. And that fearless inventory requires a sense that the psalmist provides, and that is, if I just once was honest with myself, really honest with myself, that I could be, knowing that the outcome of it would surprise me, because what happens inside of us is we convince ourselves that if I really looked at what I'm doing, or if others saw what I was doing, I would be destroyed. But the psalmist says that if you will, this is a religious word in some ways, confess. If you will confess, if you will name, and I think the key in the 12-step movement is you don't just name it to yourself, but that you name it to someone else.
Right.
And that on naming it to someone else, the fire of acid that is destroying you from the inside out is finally calmed, and then you begin to experience the reward of God's grace and mercy in your life. God does not expect any human being to be perfect, or to do all the things that they should do, or to do all the things that they want to do. God's been familiar with us as creatures for a while now. And that what the psalmist is leading us into is a process that is sometimes hard to trust. And that is, if I stop running from my failures or the things that I don't really want to do, or the characteristics that I've taken on, and I contemplate them, and I turn and I speak the truth. I'm not silent about them anymore. What was that list that you gave, Debbie, of we worship money instead of God.
Money and power and, the things that distract us from God.
Yeah. And so, in sort of an individual kind of conversation, it would be coming to terms with the fact that you've made a decision in your life that had only to do with you gaining more money, and that you didn't care about the consequences that it might be for other people. And then taking a look at that and putting it in front of yourself and going, wow, this is not God's way. This is not God's way for me. If you're running for office and you cheated, you've done something to get yourself in that place of power, or to get the job that you wanted. And then you get there, and then you're faced with the fact that you did not follow God's way to get there because you had worshiped power, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then seeing that and naming it, putting it in front of us, and holding our breath to be able to just exhale and say, oh, I don't like it, but that is the truth about me.
And then what?
What did you say? You say,
and then what?
And then what?
That's a good question.
Yeah. And then
Try and do better.
Yeah. Well, no, there is a then what. There is a then what. It comes right here in the sequence of the psalm. The then what is
Yeah,
Let me find what I'm trying to find here. Okay, my page turned and I don't know, okay. Look at verse 7. I have said, I will confess against myself my transgressions to the Lord. And then you, God, forgave me the iniquity of my sin. And here we're supposed to stop again. Because and then what is, it's like saying to God, it's your move, God, you know? And God actually makes a move. God takes the next, and then what? And God, in fact, forgives us. So then, after a time of thinking about that, I put 5 exclamation points next to that Selah, because if we could trust that God or the people around us would in fact be able to forgive us for this truth about ourselves that we do not want to name, we would name it more often. And as a result, we would live with the burden lifted from us of who we are and be able to live more into who we are.
But don't we first have to forgive ourselves for what we've done?
Yeah, I think,
Admit,
I think that's,
that's where I think that I don't want to admit it because I don't think I could forgive myself.
yeah. You raise a very interesting point.
Or if you don't admit it because you really don't think it's wrong.
Yeah, now there's
No,
that.
I know it's wrong.
Yeah,
That much I know. I know it's wrong, but
or it's
Yeah.
difficult to change. I
See,
think Elaine.
That's true. That's true.
so what I,
change.
yeah, so
Yeah.
what I want to say to you, Barbara, is you raise a good point that what about me forgiving myself? I think you cannot forgive yourself until you own up to it. So you said you didn't want to own up to it because you're afraid you won't be able to forgive yourself. But so you've got yourself locked there in a cycle.
right?
But according to the psalmist, the cycle ends with the belief that if you will take the time, if you will take a big breath and say it out loud, say it maybe just to yourself or own it to a good friend that you trust that will stay in the relationship with you and not leave you or not try to tell you, oh, that's not true. You aren't really like that. But someone that will really listen to you and stand with you in it, in that moment, yes, now it's out in front of you, and you have to figure out whether you can forgive yourself or not. But I think the wave of what will come next is the realization, the psalmist would point you to the realization that God, in fact, forgives you, and forgives you completely. And I think that it
As
says,
long as you're honest.
as long as you're honest.
Because I'm real good at rationalizing why I do things that are not right. And I almost in the end convince myself. But I know that, it's just nonsense. And you always feel better when you actually admit it. But you got to admit it to yourself first and then to others. And that's really tough to do.
Yeah. Now we're getting
I have the contemporary English version of the Bible that I read from time to time.
Yes.
And my verse 6 of that says, "We worship you, Lord, and we should always pray whenever we find out that we have sinned.
Yes.
Then we won't be swept away by a raging flood."
Yes.
So finding out, knowing that you've done wrong and finding out that you've done wrong are different, but if we really think about it, we already know it. We just haven't admitted it.
Right. And that's
So,
and
you know,
that's why it's stress.
Go ahead.
In my version, verse 6 says, God will pray to you at a time of stress. What is the stress from? The stress is, can I hold on any longer to believing I'm not guilty of this? I was going to say, when Debbie made her comment, I was going to say, well, now we're getting down to brass tacks, because Debbie owned up to the fact that she often rationalizes away. She'll have a thought, but she's figured out a way with her intelligent mind to chop it up into little enough pieces and to make it small enough so that it just goes away.
Not so bad anymore.
Right. Just wipe it off, just wipe it out of the way. But the psalmist says, watch your step now, because you may, in fact, maybe even in pursuit of a good life or a life of joy, you may be selling your life away, out from under you.
Right.
And she invites a different approach, which is, I used to say to my son when I knew he was lying, as a little boy, you always know, right? And I would look at him and I would go, now let's just stop right here for a minute. And I would say, I want you to take a really big, deep breath. Go ahead, breathe in, and when you breathe out, I want you to let the true answer come out. Don't stop it. Don't stop it. Because if you stop it, even if I believe it and it's not true, it's going to ultimately hurt, because you're going to worry now that you've told a lie to your dad, and you're going to carry that around, and that'll fester for another 4 or 5 weeks.
And he knows that you told him a lie.
That's right. That's right. And
That's a much more forgiving way, instead of saying, "Oh, I know you're lying." You're saying,
I'll give you another chance.
think about it, and you have it in yourself to recognize the truth and say it. And I think that actually strengthens confidence in your child.
Yeah.
By doing that, allowing them to actually own what they've done in a way they can understand, instead of accusing them, and then they're never going to tell you the truth.
That's right. And when he got a little bit older, he would say to me, Dad, how come you know so much about this? and I would tell him, and then I had to take a big deep breath, and I had to tell him that one of my struggles as a younger person, and I didn't know why, but I would lie for no reason. I would tell a lie for no reason at all. My mother would look at me and go, why did you lie to me? Because I don't understand it. And I would look at her and go, I don't know either. I don't know. And so my advice to him was to say, look, that's a pathway that's going to lead you to what's the psalmist say? Your tongue is going to roll up in your mouth, and you're going to really be sorry. But on the other hand, if you will come to terms with it, or confess it out, eradicate the lie, take a big deep breath, and let the truth come out with the exhale. Just don't stop it from coming out. It wants to come out. And when that happens, then you will be saved, according to this. You will be saved when high water is all around and everybody else is drowning in this thing of not being able to tell the truth. You'll be standing on a mountaintop. Your feet will be on solid ground. And then the psalmist says, you, O God, are a hiding place for me. Now, isn't it interesting? It starts out by an invitation not to hide, but to confess, to reveal. And then God becomes the hiding place. So that God provides the safe place for us to navigate in this life. You will protect me from trouble. You will surround me with shouts of deliverance. And there again comes another one of these encouragements to stop and think about this strange dynamic of life. We hide from the truth because we think, I don't know, we're better off. We think we're better off not to know, to not take the fearless inventories of ourselves. But the truth is, if we don't do it, all of our relationships suffer, all of them. Because when we are not able to be honest with ourselves, then other people will begin to feel the shields that we have put up, and there will be more and more distance between us and them, whether it's our children or our roommates or our spouses or whatever it is. That choice that we make to hide from ourselves becomes a wall of separation between us and other people who we want to be close to. But we can't be, because we haven't been close to ourselves. And we aren't because we fear,
Yeah. Fear is the word. I mean, it takes courage to actually admit when we've transgressed, to use that word. It takes courage to actually put our trust and faith in God instead of ourselves, that we can fix it, we know what's best. If you give it up to God, at least the psalmist is saying, that's the way to unburden yourself. You'll feel much better. But that takes a lot of courage and a lot of trust in God. And we human beings, I don't think we're designed to do that. We didn't step out of the garden with that inside us. We're always like with our fingers crossed, like maybe I can't fully trust God. Right. Maybe I have to rely upon myself. And that is where you mess up, I think.
Yeah, I agree. You take the matter into our own hands. And when we take the matter of our failings or our disappointments, and we take them into our own hands, then we are over here being God unto ourselves, and it gets worse. That's the whole the lesson here is it gets worse. It could get better. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been in one of these cycles in any of the relationships that you've had. God knows in 67 years, I've had a lot of opportunity to be in relationships with people where, all of a sudden I'm not proud of something I've done or something I've said, and, the hot iron is coming around and I'm about to get caught in what it is I've done or I left undone. And then I do my lesson to my son. I take a big, deep breath and I say to the person, look, you need to sit down. We need to talk. And I need to tell you something, right? Aren't those the worst words you've ever heard? Someone says, hey, I need to tell you something. And you go, I don't know, are you sure? Are you sure you need to tell me? Can't you manage that over there a little bit more? All right, so now you need to tell me. And the experience of telling something to someone, especially if it's about something that, again, you've done or you've left undone, or something that you said and then they heard you said it and you have to own up to it. And, and then you get this courage to say it or to confess it, and then you are completely at the whim of that other person. If they decide to turn on you, which is what we fear, that somehow that's going to be the end of it. Colette, did your lights go out?
Yes.
Are you in the dark in your house?
Oh, no. My light is timed to go off at 9 o'clock.
Oh.
But it's only 8:30.
Yeah.
You have to fix your clock.
All right.
It's not even 8:30, Colette.
All right. There you are. She's back. She's back.
Oh, we see you.
Sometimes I can't see what I'm doing, you know.
I do know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to laugh about it.
Sorry about that.
So,
Oh,
now the next thing that the psalmist says is we stop and we contemplate that. As I was saying in those interactions, I don't know how it is for you, but the fear is palatable in me. I do feel afraid. And what am I afraid of? I mean, the fear doesn't make sense, but I am afraid of it. And then I have to admit, because this is about me admitting things, because I like to control things.
No.
No.
And this experience that the psalmist is talking about is entering into a moment, a real moment in life where I am surrendering control.
oh,
And in a second, even if I get the breath and the courage to say, look, I'm really sorry, you need to know that I did this, and I'm sorry about it. Even then, having gotten that far, that my need to control will sometimes take over, and I come up with, I call them half-witted apologies, which is, I'm sorry, but it wasn't really my fault.
You're controlling your confession.
That's right. That's right. It's like reeling it back in, like if you knew, you'd know why I did it, because it makes sense that I did it, and that's the surrender of the control is complete. And it doesn't offer excuses. It just says, this is the condition we find ourselves in, all of us. It is our human condition. I was going to tell you, one of the commentators said that this psalm was the absolute favorite of St. Augustine.
Yeah.
And St. Augustine used to recite it. He could recite it completely, and he would recite it over and over again. And he said that these steps, which are laid out here in this psalm, he called them the prerequisite to spiritual health.
Mm-hmm.
A prerequisite to spiritual health. By the willingness to own up, and there were certainly throughout the ages in the Christian tradition, there have been monks, people who have signed off of life, and they've gone into isolation, and they spend their whole time in isolation in confession, trying to be intimately honest about themselves. And my thought is, well, sometimes maybe you need someone else to talk to in that and alleviate some of that burden so that you can get on to spiritual health. It just seems like that's like, in the 12-step program, the old timers talk about people that keep doing the 1, 2, 3. The 1, 2, 3 means you only do the first, second, and third step, and you never get on to the fourth step. You never move on. And so in this psalm, moving on to the fourth step means accepting God's forgiveness and being able to then move on and go out into the world, not as a sinless person. There's no sinless people. There's only forgiven people. And we go out as a forgiven person. And then I just love that he then goes on to say, now listen to me. Don't be like a horse. I think it should have said, don't be like an ass. That you have to put a bit and a bridle in their mouth and pull them in the direction that you want them to go. He just simply says, don't be like that. There's so much to gain by taking the steps toward honesty and integrity and getting it out. Inhale and then exhale it out into the world. Let it come out. because you will be healthier for it. Now, again, unless you start to think I'm teaching this because I'm good at it, I'm not. I'm not. Sometimes I'd rather be sick. I mean, you know what I'm talking about? I mean, I just, like, okay, I see that's the right thing to do. I see that's the right way to go. No, I'm not doing that. I'm just not. I feel
That reminds me of a lot of politicians when they make half-hearted apologies about something they've been caught doing.
Yes.
And they say something like, if I have offended anyone, or
Yes.
if I have hurt someone, they're not being honest with themselves. They know they've done something and they won't say, I did it. They'll just say, if. And it's so ridiculous. You know, it's like, you can see right through that. Why
Yeah.
bother, you know, but it's a common thing. I think there's a lot of fear there.
Yeah.
We human beings are afraid to fess up, you know.
Yeah. Yes, we are. And we don't make sense. We don't make sense. Our behavior does not make sense. And
Yeah.
you know, and adopting a pattern or practice of owning who we are. Do not be like a horse or like a mule without understanding, whose gallop must be restrained with bridle and halter, or it will not stay near you. And then he describes the negative effects of, if you're not going to do this, many griefs will be part of the path of and he calls them the wicked. I wish they wouldn't choose that word. My translation is different even than Barbara's. I don't like the word wicked. I don't think it gets the nuance of what they're talking about. I think in this case it would be many griefs are to the foolish. It's foolishness to try to live this life without this pattern of confession and humility. It's just sheer foolishness, because as I started this Bible study out and saying, look, I'm human. I know you are human, and that means that you carry in you this same struggle. So stop
Right.
pretending that you don't.
Right.
And that was supposed to be behind in the Reformation, in the Christian faith. And maybe, Debbie, you could talk about, is there a parallel in the Muslim faith that when we gather, lest we put on airs and we do what human beings do. We're cautioned against that. So as soon as we gather, we sing a hymn that talks about how great and magnificent God is, and then we have a prayer of confession. And the prayer of confession is not an individual prayer like it is in the Roman tradition, but in the Presbyterian tradition, it's a corporate ownership of what we're like, of our failures and our faults. And not just individually, but what's worse is that if we really get into this thing of denying, and then you get together with some other deniers, the effect of our human denying is cataclysmic in the world.
Well, it reminds me a little bit of what you just said, and also what Debbie said, you know, with all these gun shootings, and then the politicians, you know, will offer thoughts and prayers and this kind of thing. And yet what they should be doing, is, you know, creating laws to stem the violence, but they don't.
Yeah. And
I wonder if they say to themselves, if I could, you know, but then my party wouldn't, you know, like me anymore. You know,
And they wouldn't get that financial backing either. That's what they're worried about.
Right?
yeah, that's right.
Get that vote.
Financial backing.
So when you talk about knowing what is the right thing to do and not doing it, in that case, you know, there are a lot of reasons that they won't. Just like you suggest, finances are one. You know, party acceptance. Yeah.
Right.
conformity.
Power.
Yeah, all of it.
And power is behind the whole thing.
Yeah,
So-
and they cooperate together around that idea that we're helpless. They cooperate around they have convinced each other that we human beings are helpless to defend ourselves against weapons of war being introduced. So we all buy in. I guess, we have to buy into the idea. Well, just throw our hands up, say a prayer,
Yeah.
be nice to the people who've just lost their children,
Yeah.
and
That's right.
and let's move on because we're helpless. We're helpless.
It's almost as though, what Debbie was saying, if they could say, if I could really tell you what I think, but, my party, will expel me or whatever it is.
Right.
So instead I will offer thoughts and prayers. Yeah. So, you can just strip away that and see what the real meaning is. And they don't, just like what you were saying, well, they don't do anything. Yeah. But they know what, well, at least we hope they know what they should be doing, although they're not. Yeah.
I think a lot of them know it.
Yeah.
They're just afraid of losing that status and that power.
That's right.
So
Yep.
let me take a big risk and say, okay, we know they do it. We know they do it. We can see they do it.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't mean to suggest it was only politicians, but they are on TV in front of our faces.
They're right in your face every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Judy, I know you. I feel like I know you really well. So I can say to you that in the moment of honesty of the study of this text, I want to say to you, yes, Judy, you're right. Politicians do that, but now, what about you? What about you?
If I could do something about gun control, I
No,
would, but
no,
I did
no,
vote, early vote.
I'm not talking about you and gun
I could
control.
do that, right. Right,
So,
right.
I mean, this is one of those places, I think, where if we read the text with our minds and our hearts open, it reads us. It reads us. And
The rubber hits the road.
yes, and it doesn't at first invite us to form a critique of others. It doesn't. It invites us to be skilled at an understanding and an owning of ourselves. To owning how we go through life, what we do. And owning the fact that, I can just tell you, I have been stubborn on this issue. I don't like confession. Even if it leads me to being able to breathe and having the fresh waters on my tongue, and even if there's all those good things, I still resist it. And I know that we all do. We all do. I mean, I have had some very close friendships in my life. And one of the friendship patterns that I developed as a pastor, which was life-saving for me, was that for, let's see, how long was it? It was 21 years. I was in a group with 9 other pastors. And we didn't just sit around. We had a clinical psychologist who ran the group with us. And I'm telling you, it was a lesson in learning how to identify how we hide and how we dodge each other, how we were unwilling. I mean, I have to say, I can just, over the years, the things that were put in front of me and I was asked to own up to, I didn't have a real close relationship with my dad. And as a result of it, one of the things that I just almost don't have any skill to do is to become angry and own up to that anger with another man. I tend to cover it, I tend to hide it, but in that group of 9, we spent 2.5 hours together every Thursday for years. And in that time, inside of me, a muscle began to develop, which was my ability to say to the man across the room, I didn't like that you just said that. I really didn't like that you said that, or what you said that. That really made me angry. Because in my household where I grew up, that was completely unacceptable. It was never allowed. And so that's only just one tiny area. That group is disbanded now, and I don't go to that group anymore, but I still feel like in my relationships, I still need truth tellers, people that I can tell the truth to, and people who can tell the truth to me, so that I don't end up, what's the description? Drowning in the waters of the floods that come from living the other way. And again, I'm certain that you all don't know what I'm talking about, right?
No, it's like, I remember, when I was at Nabisco, one of the things we used to do in our team building sessions was, there was a formula. And it went something like what you're talking about, Lou. When you do such and such, it makes me feel this and this. And so what I wish, so that you get the I in, what I wish is that you would, whatever it is, change your position, or, that's a big one, but, speak to something more generally, or address the subject. So in other words, it was really a formula almost for protecting yourself from screaming out what you really thought. But yet it got the you in, and it got the I in, and it, so when you do that, it makes me feel something. So what I wish is that you would, and then whatever it is. And then they could, object, but at least it got you the ability to say just, wait.
To get it out.
Yeah, to get it out.
You confessed it. You were vulnerable. You've let go of the control of the information and just said, look, this is how I am. This is how I'm reacting. I don't like what you're doing. I don't like the way you say it. That puts you in the room, and it goes back to that letting go of control. And I think that Augustine can say, that this is a prerequisite to spiritual health, because spiritual health begins with letting go of me being God, and letting God be God.
Yeah, you had asked earlier if in Islam we have corporate prayer. We don't, not as such, but at certain times when the prayer is over, the imam, whoever's leading the worship, will make prayers and ask for forgiveness, knowing about Tawheed, which is the principle, the guiding principle of Islam, the oneness of God. And anything that you put your faith in other than God, like what we talked about before, money, fame, or yourself, is actually going to do you great harm. And the recognition of that, to surrender yourself to God, is like the moving principle in Islam. And anything short of that, you're letting yourself in for, you're fooling yourself. You're letting yourself in for trouble. And I think that's what the psalmist is saying here, basically. Be guided by God, seek refuge in God, ask forgiveness from God, and let all the rest of the stuff go. And it'll really unburden you. But who can do that perfectly? I don't know anyone, and that's the problem. We try, we always fall short. And but it does help to have somebody to kick you in the pants and remind you.
Yes. Yeah, because when you said we try, there's an honest voice in me that goes, yeah, sometimes I try.
Yeah.
sometimes I don't.
Right.
Honestly, I can walk away from this. I don't need this. I just forget about it. And that also takes hold in my life. And that is, again, I love what you said, like anything that causes us not to trust completely in God. I mean, I often think about how in the practice of the Muslim faith, there is this prostrate form of, down, bent down with the head down and, knees down, and how, how much, in some ways, how much that actually does describe a posture that is healthy for human beings. It's just healthy. It's not about putting yourself down or making yourself less than you are. That's not the point. It's allowing God to be God.
Sujood means that you're actually surrendering yourself completely to God. And it doesn't matter what anybody else around you is doing. At that moment, it's just you and God. Or at least it should be. We all fall short. There's always a distraction. But that's what you're trying to attain. I think we're always trying to perfect ourselves, which, I guess that's it.
I remember when I was associate pastor, I had a senior pastor that I really admired and respected. I learned so much from him. And he preached, he wasn't a great preacher, but he was a good preacher. And he preached a sermon at the First Presbyterian Church in Ewing. And I don't know what the text was or how he got into it, but he felt the need in front of the congregation to, up there on the platform, to get down on his knees and prostrate himself in a model of prayer and humility. And I'll tell you the truth, the congregation didn't like it. They did not like it. It didn't feel, I don't know, somehow it felt like, we're Presbyterians.
Catholics, they felt Catholic.
We sit upright, we don't even have the kneeler that the Catholics have. We're not doing that. Like, what are you going to, next you're going to be asking us to do that. And there was a murmur within the life of the church to say, you know what, okay, we get your point, don't do that again.
It's kind of like when Christ bathed the feet of the disciples. It's being humble before God.
Yes.
Being a servant to God, being a servant to others. That maybe makes people uncomfortable, I guess. I don't know, but as a Muslim, I'm real comfortable with it now. I'm just not real good at it 24 hours a day. That's all. But, and who is, but I don't know.
Well, it reminds me when Jesus wanted to wash Peter's feet, Peter was going to have none of it. And then Jesus' words to Peter were, unless you let me humble myself and wash your feet, nothing of what the walk of the reign of God will be part of your life. This is it. This is the key, this humility.
Right. And Peter wasn't understanding that.
No.
That it meant everyone, not just, a few, and then there are those up there. We're all on the same level. Or at least I think that's what Jesus was trying to say.
Yeah.
We're all humble. We all should be humbled before God. Anyway, I would ask in humility if people would pray extra hard for everybody in Israel and Gaza this week, because it just looks like it's a horrific situation that I can't see any way out. I don't know what's going to happen, but
Yeah, you're right.
I think those are beautiful words, Debbie, because I think that there comes a time to raise a banner and a sword and move forward on a cause, but I really believe that the world right now needs people to humble themselves and come together and to acknowledge. I mean, there have been, if you want to start listing the crimes or the sins that have been committed, like the list is so long. Now is the time to say, what do we want to happen in the world? Because pretty soon everybody's going to be involved in this war.
Right,
Everybody.
right.
Everybody's children are going to be dying. And I mean, I thought we knew that was possible because we saw it happen. It did happen. And it can happen again. And I'm with you 100%. I hope that we're all praying for that. And I hope that we can pray for it. Maybe we could even say a prayer now as we, close our time together.
Yes.
To just give the world and the people of the world. And I, my heart goes out to all the mothers whose children are dead and are being dead, and then the mothers who are dying, and the soldiers who are dying. Like, it just seems like we are hell-bent on death as the solution.
Right.
And I don't know when death has ever been the solution. I don't know.
That's been a concern, from the beginning. What is the objective? What's the goal? If this is something interim, what's long term? What is, and if peace is long term, who are the actors? Who should be sitting there? Because the primal people now, they should be off stage. I mean, they just, they're not going to come to the table. So then who is? So then the real concern is, it's just a madness in the air, and there's no goal in sight. There's no objective in sight. There's no plan in sight, and it's just chaos.
Yeah.
It's just chaos.
And again, I think the psalmist would say a good step in the right direction would be a real searching confession on the part of all of us.
Right.
And we might recognize that we've had a bigger hand than we know in some of these problems. We've had really big hand in this, and it's not going to appear to us like that. So, would you join me in a prayer? I'll be happy to lead us, unless somebody else wants to lead in the prayer.
No, you.
All right, so I'm happy to lead us then. Will you pray with me? Gracious God, we people on this planet, we have always needed your care and keeping, whether we admitted it or not. We've needed it as peoples together in large groups, and we've needed it as individuals. And you have been faithful to us. But we forget, we become resentful, we take matters into our own hands. We don't know how to endure injustice. We don't know how to suffer for righteousness. And so we just ask that as the world seems to be turning again to find life in causing death, or to find freedom in the pursuit of war, we just ask that you would let your Spirit rain down from the heavens, from the billions of stars high in the universe, and let your grace and mercy fall upon the world. Give us the spirit that defies our own arrogance and invites us in humility, both as large groups of people in the world and as us as individuals, as we go about our lives tonight and we lie down and we count upon your care and keeping through the night until we wake in the morning. Instill in us, O God, a faith that lets us let go and lets you take the lead. And we pray that for the world. Amen.
Amen.
All right, my friends, thank you for this little journey. I appreciate you going on it with me, and we'll come back next week and see what adventures are here in store for us with Psalm 33. Okay? Good night to those of you who are watching
Have a good night.
online. I'm glad you tuned in, and I hope you were able to experience something of it too. Good night. God bless you all.
Everybody.
Bless you.
Good night.
Good night, all.
See you next week.
Okay. Sorry to you, those of you who are watching online, I didn't turn the broadcast off, but it is over. And I'll say again to you, good night.